Seed starting mix. What is it? Do we need it? And I'll give you my recipe. So would you be really surprised if I said that you do not need to go and buy fancy seed mixes from the garden centre? Or even that if I said you could save a fortune and make it yourself? Because you pretty much only need a couple of ingredients. Seed starting mix and potting mix are slightly different because a seed doesn't need the same things that a plant does. And it's because those little seeds that we sow, they're a bit like an egg. They've got everything in there they need to germinate and for the first few weeks of that little plant's life. After then, we move on to a potting mix and I'll explain why. Okay, so as I said, seeds have everything they need. All the energy and everything is encased in that tiny little seed. So what do we actually need to get those seeds to start to germinate? Well, believe it or not, in the whole, seeds only need three things. They need moisture, they need warmth, and they need oxygen. So did you notice that we don't have soil or compost in that list? Now I say on the whole because obviously there are some seeds that need, say, a period of cold, or some seeds even need light. But in the whole, or the majority, they only need those three things. So therefore, our seed mixes don't need to be super rich. They don't need to have lots of fertiliser in them. They don't need fancy composts or anything like that. Actually, given how delicate little seedlings are, those little tiny super thin roots, lots of nutrition in your seed mix, your compost, your potting mix can actually damage those little roots. But when we move them on, when they're tiny little plants, after they've got the first true leaves, that's when they need a bit more nutrition. So that's when we'll use proper compost to give them everything they need. And if you want to see my video about potting mix rather than seed starting mix, I'll put it up at the end of this video. With that in mind then, what do you need to put in your seed mix? Quite simply, you need just a growing medium that will hold moisture, not be soaking wet. And you want it to be really, really light and fluffy and airy, okay? Because, as I said, those little seedling roots are all really, really delicate and tiny, so you don't want them to have to struggle and fight their way through something that's awful lumpy or heavy or claggy. You want them to have a nice easy time of it. And remember, we will move them on once they're a bit bigger, so you know, this is just for their start in life. So here we go then. This is how I do it. This is my recipe. Now, as I always say to you guys, this is my recipe. Everyone's got their own recipes that work for them, and you do you. So let me show you then. I've got two options I'm going to talk to you about as the growing medium. I get asked an awful lot, can you reuse your compost? And you know what? Used compost is the perfect thing for your seed starting mix because it is very, very low in nutrition or fertiliser in there. So, you know, you wouldn't really be using it for a lot else, but your little seedlings won't get damaged by it. Now, there is a point to this. So I said you can use your spent or used compost. And this is what I've got here. This is my compost that's come out of my pots that I grew my tomatoes and peppers in last year. But before I would use that in a seed mix, there are a couple of things I will do. So the first thing I do then, you can see how super fine and fluffy this is. The very first thing I always do is I sieve it. I want to get out anything in there that, you know, large bits of twig, little bits of stone, you know, anything that's a bit clumpy, bits of root, that kind of thing, because I want it to be super fine and fluffy to help those little plant roots on. The next thing I do is I actually sterilise it. Basically, I sterilise my compost just to take away any risks. Now, I know a lot of you guys will be really interested in sterilising your compost, so I'm going to look at it more in depth in the next video. That's one of my grown medium options. The second one is this. It's cocoa coir. So this is made from the husks and fibres of coconuts. You can buy it in these bricks and then you soak that in water. And it pretty much is there instead of compost. They're both there to do the same thing in a seed starting mix. And that is, it's a medium for the little plants to grow in. So, you know, they can grow their roots in there and it stabilises them. But also, and importantly, it's moisture retaining. Compost and cocoa coir are both really well known for being moisture retaining. So you can use them, you can mix them together if you don't have a lot of one or the other and you're trying to pad it out and make it go further, or you can use one or the other. It's up to you. Okay, now the other ingredient is something called perlite, and I'm going to put my mask on for this. And it's also why I'm wearing gloves. Not because it's caustic or anything like that. Simply because this is actually a volcanic rock. It is super, super lightweight. It's like polystyrene almost, but it's a rock. Because in the extreme heat of the volcano, it has popped, if you like popcorn or Rice Krispies. And it is very, very light, but it's almost like a glass. But the reason for the gloves and the mask is because you learn over the years if you use this stuff, when it's all broken up and dusty, that dust gets into the air very, very easily, and you really don't want to be breathing it in if you can. The gloves are because I have found working with this, little slivers of it can be sharp and you often get them in your hands like splinters, so that's why I wear gloves. So that is perlite. As you can see, it is so lightweight that if I'm not careful here, the wind will catch it and blow it. So that is 3 ingredients. I can take this off for just now because I'm not using it. But the perlite then, perlite is super, super lightweight and it's very porous. So it doesn't really hold on to any water or anything like that, which means it makes your mix very, very light and airy. Lets the oxygen into the seeds and the little plant's roots because it needs the oxygen. But also it helps with drainage. And that's one of the things that a lot of people will buy seed mixes because they've had real problems with things like damping off. So damping off is basically it's a fungal disease that your little seedlings can get, and it will kill them. And it's caused when you get, it's like, if you think like a triangle with 3 sides, if you've got a plant that's susceptible to damping off and you have a very, very wet medium, and the pathogen exists in the compost, soil, seed mix you're using, if you have all 3 of those, then damping off is probably going to happen and kill your little seedlings. So what we do to try and avoid it and help is we sterilise our potting mix to kill off any pathogens that are in there, and we're very careful about our watering. We don't overwater, and we have a mix that drains very, very well, so that if there's any pathogens in the air, they're not finding an environment that they want to be in. Okay, so that's the simplest I can put for you, but basically have a very, very free draining mix for your seeds and your seedlings, and try not to overwater. But now, my recipe then. Well, as I said, everyone will have their own recipe that works for them. Okay, this is mine, so feel free if you want to try it out, but also there are plenty of other folk out there who'll have their recipes online too. Mine's is super simple. So here we go then, let's make my mix. And because I'm dealing with perlite, the mask is going back on. It's a lovely mask, isn't it? I'm quite fond of this mask. Flowers. Okay, so basically it is this simple. 1 part of your growing medium, so that can be your compost, your cocoa coir, or if you've mixed the 2 together, okay? Not 2 parts mixed, but if you mix it all together and then 1 part of that. So 1 part of growing medium and 1 part perlite. It's that simple. So you don't have to get all caught up in weights because it can get a bit complicated. 1 part, whatever you use as a measure, just keep it consistent. So 1 flower pot full of grown medium, 1 flower pot full of perlite. how lightweight this stuff is. One hand. And then mix. Now, if you guys watched me make my potting mix last year, the first thing you'll notice is how much more perlite there is in this mix. It is a much, much drier mix. So it's that simple, and you just carry on like that, 1 part grown medium, 1 part perlite, until you've got the amount that you're going to need. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, doing this can save you a fortune, because although if you're only buying 1 of those little bags of seed starting mix from the shops, it doesn't cost a lot. But if you need a lot of it, it soon adds up, so this is a great way to do it. So there you go guys, I hope that was helpful. As I promised, this is the video if you want to see me make my potting mix last year. Hope this was useful guys, and I will see you next week. See you folks!